I want to talk about functions, namely default parameters this time. It's a fairly simple topic and it's going to be a very quick video. So here I have a function that simply adds two parameters, whatever you give it, right? So if I call this and let's say 1 and 2, and if I console log the result, right? If I try to run this, well, simple enough, we get 3. What do you know? That's simple. But what happens if I don't give it a second parameter? Well, if I remove this, if I try to run it now, you'll notice that we get none, or not a number. Well, why do we get that? That's because while the first parameter a is 1, b in our case, by default, if we don't give it at call time, right, it's going to be assigned a value undefined. And a number plus undefined, well, that's not a number, right? That's the result. We can prove this by just saying 1 plus undefined in this case, and as you can see, we get not a number. So how do we solve this issue? Well, that's fairly simple. We can use default parameters, and what default parameter says is if you don't give me this parameter, default it to this value, right? So I can say here, if you don't give me the second parameter, default it to the value 0. Simple as that, right? And if I call this again with just one parameter, you'll notice that we get, well, 1, the same number that we gave into the function. But that's really nice because now we actually have a usable value that's also correct. Adding just 1 is simply 1, right? Kind of makes sense. So it's all nice and dandy, but one more key thing that I haven't heard being talked about is that these values are being actually evaluated every single time you call them. So what happens if I say here, let's say def from default equals, or just say def here and just give it the def value, right? And then assigning def to say 17 in here. If I'm gonna try to run this, well, notice we get 18 in this case. Simple enough. But if I try to assign def another value, something like, let's say 29, if I run this again, you'll notice that we get 18 and then 30. And the default value changed. So you can kind of control the default value of the function at runtime, which is pretty nice. That means that this is actually evaluated as an expression at call time, whenever you call the function, not just at runtime, whenever you're defining that function. That's one really important aspect. Now let's add one more parameter to this function. Let's say, for example, c, and we're going to default this to 1. Why? Well, that's simple, because I'm going to multiply this value by c, right? Simple enough, just some arithmetics in here. And if I try to add 1, right, for this function, it should actually give me just 1, right? Because simple enough, we got 1 plus 0 times 1. If I give it any other numbers, for example, if I give it 3 then 2, we should get a proper result. We should get, well, 8. Why? That's because 1 plus 3 is 4 and 4 times 2 is 8, right? Simple mathematics. So you can add as many parameters as you want, but let's say that's a bit kind of difficult. Like, why do I have to actually pass them in this exact order? What if I want my b value to be default and my c value to still be something custom, right? If I want, for example, to have my b value default, I'm gonna have to actually type in 0 right here, and maybe I don't know the actual default value, right? So this will work, right? I get 2, that's because 1 times 2 is 2. But that's not what we want. To actually combat this, what you can do is use destructuring to your own advantage. I have talked about destructuring in a previous video, you can check up top. But basically what it is to pass in parameters in any order, right? You can do it like so inside the function here, just by putting your parameters inside brackets, and then you have these default parameters already in here. What you can do, instead of saying 1, 0, and 2 now, you're gonna have to create an object that has the properties A, B, and C, right? And if we want to not actually have to set B to 0, we can in this case. we can say something like this. And now if I try to run this, you'll notice we get 2, even though we only passed in 2 parameters here. That's because, well, the function here takes in an object and it breaks it down, right? It says, okay, do you have the property A? Oh, you do. Well, come over here. I'm gonna make you 1. So it's gonna make A equal to 1. Do you have the property B? Well, I don't have the property B. What do you mean? I only have A and C. Well, that's no good. I'm gonna become 0 for that case. And then it's going to ask, do you have property C? Well, yes, I do. And I'm gonna overwrite my default value. I'm not gonna be 1. I'm gonna be 2 because you gave me that value. Of course, you can also just give it the one single value A, and that would result in the same result as before. Okay. So that's about it with the default parameters. There's not much else to it. You can take a look at the MDN documentation, but that's the most important things that you should take from default parameterizing, right? And that's about it with default parameters. JavaScript really lets you provide any parameter you'd want and default any other one you would not want to pass every single time, which is really, really amazing, I think, and you should make use of this feature in the future. All right. Thank you guys for watching and see you next time.